Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today. Hi, everyone. The topic I'm going to talk about today uses a lot of jargon and history, but it's something I'm really interested in, and I hope you guys will be too. So just kind of bear along with me. It all works out in the end. Science is a wonderful thing. There are many branches which are normally assembled into three major groups. Natural or pure science, which is the science of natural phenomena such as biology, cosmology, and geography. Formal science, which explores mathematics and logic, and social science, which would entail, among others, psychology and anthropology. The difference between these three fundamental groups reside in the breakdown of each branch. Whereas natural pure science deals with the understanding of natural phenomena, and social science is concerned with the social and relationships among individuals, they are both based on observational and empirical evidence that is reproducible in a clinical setting. Something is not deemed correct until it can be proven repeatedly. These are the empirical sciences. Formal science, on the other hand, is not concerned with the validity of theories based on observations and empirical methods, but rather with the properties of formal systems based on definitions and rules. They aid the natural and social sciences by providing information about the structures they use to describe the world, and all statements are analytic. Physics is a natural science that involves the study of matter and its motion and behavior through space and time, along with related concepts such as energy and force. Basically, its main goal is to understand how the universe behaves. Next to astronomy, physics is one of the oldest academic disciplines. Beginning with Max Planck in 1900, and then from a 1905 paper from Albert Einstein, a new category of physics began to form, and by the mid-1920s, was in full realization by scientists such as Erwin Schrödinger, Werner Heisenberg, and Max Born. This new science is collectively called quantum physics. This new branch of physics differs from classical physics, which is only focused on the macroscopic scale. In quantum physics, also known as quantum mechanics, quantum theory, and quantum field theory, it is the microscopic scale of matter and energy levels of atoms and subatomic particles that is concentrated on. Quantum physics is rooted in mathematics and chemistry. One of the most important mathematical applications is the wave function, which provides information about the probability aptitude of position, momentum, and other physical properties of a particle. Important applications of quantum theory include quantum chemistry, superconducting magnets, light-emitting diodes, and the laser, the transistor, the semiconductors, such as microprocessor, medical and research imaging, such as magnetic resonance imaging, or MRIs, and electron microscopy. Explanations for many biological and physical phenomena are rooted in the nature of the chemical bond, most notably the macromolecule DNA. All right, did everybody get that? Taking notes? I know, right? I'm sure you're asking us, why is Dina giving us a science lesson? Well, there is a reason. The topic I'm speaking about today uses a lot of this terminology, and in the end, I would like everyone to have a good understanding of what I'm talking about. So what am I talking about? I'd like to show how pure science has proven the existence of paranormal and psychic phenomena, collectively known as psi, such as telepathy, telekinesis, reincarnation, clairvoyance, near-death experiences, remote viewing, ESP, and precognition, and I'm going to use a former astronaut to do it. A little history. Parapsychology is the study of mental phenomena that are excluded from or inexplicable by orthodox scientific psychology. The Rhine Research Center defines parapsychology as the scientific study of interactions between living organisms and their external environment that seem to transcend the known physical laws of nature. It is a component of a broader study of the consciousness and the mind. Some people call it a pseudoscience, although due to recent overwhelming scientific evidence, they might be changing their minds. Toward the end of the 19th century, there was a rise of mediums, ghost hunters, mind readers, levitators of tables, and mystics. But most of the psychical research has been mainly concerned with working with mediums to prove the evidence of life after death. Interestingly, in 1927, a little after quantum physics hit the mainstream scientific world, that type of psychic information gained with other than sensory means was drawing the entrance of Dr. J.B. Rhine at Duke University. Now known as the father of modern parapsychology, it was Rhine that coined the term extrasensory perception, ESP, and named this type of study parapsychology. Dr. Rhine created the Duke Parapsychological Laboratory out of Duke University and founded the Journal of Parapsychology as an independent, peer-reviewed professional journal to provide an outlet for reporting the findings from the Duke research as well as from other labs. He created experiments where he would use Zener cards about the size of regular playing cards. These cards were composed of decks of 25 cards, with each card having one of 5 symbols on one side: a cross, a star, wavy lines, circle, and a square. Zener cards testing under various experimental conditions entailed subjects attempting to guess these cards. Out of each deck of 25 cards, 5 correct guesses were expected by chance. By 1940, 33 experiments had been accumulated involving almost 1 million trials. 27 of the 33 studies produced statistically significant results, which is an exceptional record even for today. Dr. Rhine has written many books on the subject, including extrasensory perception. In 1934, one of these books, chronicling these experiments among other numerous tomes, was actually called Extrasensory Perception. There have been other experiments by different doctors and scientists also to try to unravel the psi mystery. ESP cards and dice games have long since been replaced by modern techniques that allow more subtle measurements of psi, and such as by looking at the physiological changes or bioenergy characteristics of physics and healers, or by measuring the telepathic awareness of emotional targets in a simulated dreamlike situation. Efforts are made to detect clues that come directly from the psi experiencers themselves, whether they're healers, intuitives, or simply ordinary people who have these extraordinary experiences, which we all know we're capable of. By the 1970s, the world had moved on to a more complex investigation of the paranormal. Both the Soviet and the U.S. governments were deeply invested in efforts to try to develop psychic spying. The American program was tasked and funded for 2 decades under intense and regular scrutiny by the Department of Defense, as well as the CIA, DEA, NSA, NSC, and the Secret Service, so like a whole bunch of people. For the final decade, from 1985 to 1995, the scientific wing of this effort was directed by Edwin C. May, who was a PhD in low-energy nuclear physics. He's the one that helped shape this multi-million-dollar program until it was shut down. Ultimately, May and his colleagues have been documenting all of this formerly top-secret and classified material in what will now be a 10-volume archive of both data and somewhat redacted operational records. May co-edited the book's Anomalous Cognition, which is the neutralized term for perceptual psi, and ESP Wars, East and West, both released in 2014. In 2015, Parapsychology, a handbook for the 21st century, was published. It was edited principally by Edsel Cardinia, who is a PhD at Sweden's University and the director of the Center for Research on Consciousness and Anomalous Psychology. Most of the other contributors of these stout volumes hold doctorates in related fields. Each book has detailed early chapters on suitable methods for psi research and attempted replications. In 2016, Jessica Utz, who's a professor of statistics at the University of California, Irvine, became the 111th president of the American Statistical Association. So these were all well-respected doctors in their respective fields and not an assembly of mall-front fortune tellers. In this handbook, Edward Kelly, PhD, a research professor in the Division of Perceptual Sciences at the University of Virginia, makes an attempt to demonstrate that the mind can't possibly be identical with the embodied brain. The mind is undetectable by instruments, must be neither material nor energetic, and may be able to survive death. How, then, can it couple to the brain and other organs? Via psi, maybe. It's an opinion seldom heard from neuroscientists, but nonetheless has increasing prestige among panpsychics, philosophers such as Galen Strawson and David Chalmers. It's the basis of Hindu theology and also a background assumption and the understanding of some of the parapsychologists, who consider that mind not only permeates the universe, but it's also its source and substrate. So, with all this history under our belts, where are we now, and what about that astronaut I spoke about? The astronaut's name is Edgar Mitchell, and he was the 6th person that walked on the moon while on the Apollo 14 mission. I first saw Edgar Mitchell on a TV show that I enjoy called Ancient Aliens. And his hometown was near Roswell, New Mexico, so he had the in since he was a local boy on all of the goings-on at Roswell at that time. Now, I know that there are things you're not supposed to talk about in polite company: religion, politics, money, and I'm going to add aliens. So, that being said, I did a little bit of research on Edgar Mitchell and came across a DVD that I'd actually had for quite a few years but never watched. I ended up watching it on YouTube, and I would definitely encourage you to do the same. I thought it was fascinating. The name is The Quantum Hologram and Remote Viewing. If you get an opportunity, check it out. Dr. Mitchell has since passed away last year, 2016, but there's quite a lot of videos of him that are worth watching. So, what is the quantum hologram, and what led up to its discovery? It's a model Dr. Mitchell uses to prove how we can access our psychic abilities through ESP, telepathy, clairvoyance, and remote viewing, just to name a same, on the quantum level. This is not to be confused with a holographic universe. A holographic universe is from an idea first suggested in the 1990s, where all the information that makes up our 3D reality, plus time, is contained in a 2D surface on its boundaries and is based on the principle of string theory. Anybody that's heard me speak knows I like my string theory. We're not going to talk about that today, though. I'm going to tell you about Edgar Mitchell and his quantum hologram theory. While waiting to go to the moon, Dr. Mitchell had been reading some of J.B. Rhine's literature on the parapsychological phenomena and decided that he was going to conduct an ad hoc experiment in space. I don't know if any of you guys remember this. There was a big hubbub about it back in the day. But he wanted to see if telepathy was possible 200,000 miles above the Earth. The test involved the men on Earth in the control room guessing the correct order of certain standard symbols as Mitchell sent them from space by telepathy, and it would later be judged a moderate success. They got quite a few right. Even though he had the experiment from NASA, it eventually came out, and when he started discussing the details of the experiment, it unfortunately caused a lot of personnel to shun him. They joked that he had gotten lost in space. But that experiment was not the most remarkable thing that happened to him while he was hovering above the Earth. While on the way back to the Earth from the moon, he had a profound experience that would set him on a pursuit that he endeavored to solve and ultimately drove him to become the founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, in which he was actually nominated for a Nobel Prize in Noetic Sciences for. He and the crew of Apollo 14 were rotating every 20 minutes in what's called a barbecue mode, and Edgar had a 360-degree panoramic view of the Earth, the moon, and the sun. He said the visibility was incredible. As he was looking at everything at once, he began to realize that the molecules in his body, in his ship, and his fellow astronauts, they were all the same. Until recently, he had been a very scientific, left-minded thinker, but as he had recently started to focus on studying consciousness, it opened up his mind just enough to have this visceral event that caused him to have a wow moment that was accompanied by an ecstasy that he had never felt before. He explained this experience by saying, quote, "Every couple of minutes, you'd get to see the sun, the earth, the moon, the heavens, and that was a pretty wild experience. I suddenly realized the molecules of my body, the molecules of the spacecraft, and those of my partners had been prototyped in some ancient generation of stars. And okay, that was a nice intellectual knowledge, but all of a sudden it hit me at the gut, and wow, those are my molecules. It became personal. I could see the stars, see the separateness of things, but felt an interconnectedness of everything. It was personal, it was wild, it was ecstatic." He was so moved that when he returned to Earth, he determined that he'd find a name for this feeling that he'd had. Surely he wasn't the first astronaut to experience such ecstasy in space. Could it be found on Earth as well? It was such a profound connection to the Earth and the stars that he felt an all-knowing feeling on the ways of the universe, and it was accompanied by such euphoria that continued well after he had landed, and he was determined to find out more about it. He searched scientific literature but found nothing to corroborate this divine feeling. He then looked in mystical, not religious, he points out, He then looked at mystical properties and found that every culture was reporting these similar types of connectiveness. He believed that the mystics have always said we are all interconnected, and that's what he was experiencing. It was an esoteric, transcendent experience. Exoteric and the external communication. He found that those differ not from the mystics, but from the followers that had no experience. Esoteric is the foundation of religion, but it's the esoteric that becomes religion. After several months of research, he found the name that he coveted. He believed his experience was called Savakalpa Samadhi, in which he intrinsically felt for the first time that we were all connected. He was quoted as saying, "The experience I had on the flight was akin to a religious experience. It was euphoric, one of those rare moments in life when you seem to be able to reach out and touch the universe, when you had an intuitive flash about the real meaning of truth. And also, my view of our planet was a glimpse of divinity." Can you imagine? Awesome. Savakalpa Samadhi is defined as, in this state, one lets go of the ego and becomes aware of spirit beyond creation. The soul is unable to absorb the fire of spirit wisdom that roasts or destroys the seeds of body-bound inclinations. The soul as the meditator, its state of meditation, and the spirit as the object of meditation all become one. The separate wave of the soul meditating in the ocean of spirit becomes merged with the spirit. The soul does not lose its identity, but only expands into spirit. In Savakalpa Samadhi, the mind is conscious only of the spirit within. It is not conscious of the exterior world. The body is in a trance-like state, but the consciousness is fully perceptive of its blissful experience within. Other astronauts have had this type of experience. It's called an overview effect. It's where the astronauts get a cognitive shift in awareness during space flight, often when viewing the Earth from orbit or the lunar surface, which I can only imagine. So apparently science led him to the moon, and the moon led him to the mystic, which is where we are today. Again, he searched scientific literature trying to find the answers, but he couldn't find anything. He realized that the science based on a Newtonian materialistic concept would say that consciousness, or how we perceive things, are a byproduct of matter or the accidental organization of matter. But in the ancient traditions, they perceive that consciousness is the fundamental stuff that matter descends from. He believes, moving forward and trying to solve the enigma of consciousness, that everyone should keep using their modern technology, but they would approach it with the concept of mysticism. His plan to make that happen is what he calls the quantum hologram, or more specifically, the phase conjugate adaptive resonance, PCAR. As most of us in the room, excuse me, are neither mathematicians nor physicists, I'm going to break it down as simply as possible, but I definitely encourage everyone to check out any of Dr. Mitchell's books, published papers, or numerous videos on YouTube. I actually saw some of his books were free on ebook sites, so check him out. It's worth reading. He's very intelligent and very down to earth, excuse the pun, at the same time. All right, so quantum means a little packet, or a little amount. Quantum theory tells us that both light and matter consist of tiny particles which have wave-like properties associated with them. Light is composed of particles called photons, and matter is composed of particles called electrons, protons, and neutrons. Quantum mechanics just means the study of small particles. Are we having flashbacks to school? Adaptive just means that the person has to perceive the signal and utilize the information and be open to it. Phase conjugate is a mathematical term describing how resonance takes place, and we are not even going to talk about that. In order to describe and understand phase conjugate adaptive resonance, PCAR, all you need to really understand is the last word, which is resonance. Resonance, in physics, is a phenomenon in which a vibrating system or external force drives another system to oscillate with greater aptitude at specific frequencies. It would resonate as a standing wave. So think about if you were shaking hands with someone. There's two systems, me and the other person. We're each doing something separate, but we're doing the same. Or if you were jumping rope, one system would be on one end, one system would be on the other, but as they move together, the same two resonant conjugate waves that they appear to be become a standing wave. This is resonance. It's just mathematical lingo. Quantum mathematics are different than Newtonian classic physics because of 4 properties. They are entanglement, non-locality, resonance, which is actually found in both, and coherence. Entanglement means if a subatomic particle, if there's 2 that are ever in a process together and they go apart no matter how far across the universe, across the room, what happens to one happens to the other. They automatically react. It's like they instantly know what happens. According to the best theory, it doesn't matter how far they are, they just maintain correlation if something happens. Entanglement and non-locality is the description of the fact that they know instantaneously regardless of how far away they are, which is an enigma for general relativity and Einstein's special relativity, but it has been demonstrated that it is true, so just go with me. Non-locality is a property of nature at that level. Coherence means that the light waveforms are together. Difference between combed hair and not combed hair was a pretty good analogy. Polarized light is coherent, the waveforms that are all structured. These are the 4 fundamental properties at a quantum level that are relevant to our new understanding of these type phenomena at the subatomic level. But for 80 years, scientists never believed it applied to macro world of reality. We now know it does. It does apply to it, and it's also available through certain conditions, generally through a process called resonance. If you pluck a violin string here and another violin is across the room, that violin is also going to vibrate due to resonance. It is precisely the way of quantum mechanics was initially formulated that knowing what would seem to bring reality at the level of existence. That was one of the earliest interpretations, is that there is an interaction of mind and matter that have come together, and quantum mechanics started to formulate that in the sense that we can formulate things in such a way that they don't become real until they are known. But it's still true that mind matter comes together, and we can study some of these powerful aspects by our own nature and mind and consciousness using quantum mechanics. For example, it is because it is entanglement, coherent, non-locality, that this information flows in resonance because it all plays together. And the ancient dogma that only pertains to subatomic matter is dead wrong. We have shown in modern times that nature is all connected this way. Non-locality tests have been done where if you were to put someone in a room, they've done many tests like this. They have 2 subjects, they put them in 2 different rooms, separated where no electromagnetic signals can get through. And you can hook 2 people up to the same EEG machines, and if they're compatible, they both have the same brain waves when they think of each other. Numerous tests have been done. So, and it's like a mother who knows her baby's not all right, even though she's not in the same room with her. You just know it, you just feel it. That's the great enigma on how information propagates. Einstein's special relativity theory says that information nor anything else cannot be propagated faster than the speed of light. But non-locality shows us that it's an instantaneous property. We don't quite understand the mechanism now. There's a lot of physics that go into this. But the primary issue is called a zero-point energy field, which, seems to be the propagator of this type of energy. Again, I'm just going to go into it. So, back in the day, before we had all of these fancy names and microscopes to see all these tiny little things, people thought that information traveled through the ether. It was the ether that carried all knowledge or carried anything that they couldn't see. They termed it the ether. Well, the ether has been changed, the name ether has been changed to the zero-point energy field, which is the propagator of this information. The ether would pervade all space. If light was a wave, where did it wave? How did it wave? How did we see the wave? It was in the ether. Michael Morley had an experiment in the 1900s that measured the speed of light in different parts of the Earth and discovered it didn't matter where they were because the speed of light was the same regardless of where you measured it. So the natural conclusion was there was no ether or there'd be a Doppler effect, which is a whole other thing. Turns out that wasn't true. That was the wrong interpretation. That space isn't empty. It's filled with quantum fluctuations That's shown by several different experiments and studies, so we now call that the zero-point energy field. It means that the basic concept here is that we've known forever, since quantum mechanics, that matter, when in its natural state, is emitting and reabsorbing energy continually, and even if you take it down to absolute 0 degrees Kelvin, which is supposed to be inert, we even know matter changes properties and it still emits and reabsorbs energy even at the 0 degrees Kelvin. That's why it's called the zero-point energy field. Space generally is at 0 degrees Kelvin. It's presumed that the zero-point energy field pervades all space. So now that we have all of this information, we have all of these definitions, what am I talking about? We spoke about matter emitting and reabsorbing energy continuously for the 80 years that quantum physics have been concerned with individual particles and how they spin and radiate. But a doctor from Germany named Dr. Walter Schirm, who's also very interesting if you are ever online want to look at something good, he was trying to improve MRI technology. He's actually the one that discovered the quantum hologram. And he discovered it in a way that he was trying to improve resolution in MRIs. Now, of course, MRIs use resonance, so he was the top guy to do this. He discovered a property called quantum holography, and what it is, instead of studying individual emissions, you study them as a group. And an example would be if you looked at the ridges on your finger and focus on a single ridge. Doesn't provide much information. But if you look at all your fingers and the fingerprints as a group, that provides the information that uniquely identifies you. Comparably, when you study the quantum photon emissions from any matter, it is carrying the information about the events in the life history of that piece of matter, whether it's a table, a book, the trees, me, or you. He asserts that this is a wow discovery because it does a number of things. It elevates information in physics to the same level and importance of energy itself. Information is just patterns of energy that we give meaning to. Let me repeat that. Information is just patterns of energy that we give meaning to. Whether it's molecular, light, something hanging on the wall. And that's how we know anything at all. We can process information. This mathematical formalism that goes with this group study also tells us that this energy of this information is non-local and cured in the zero-point energy field. As we can then say, we've heard the mystical traditions of the Akashic record. This is the mechanism that allows the Akashic record to take place. It's nature's memory system. It's the mechanism to carry the history of everything throughout nature, no matter what the time, past, present, future. It's all there. It's recoverable through resonance. That's how we get this information. The mother and the child, they're resonating. Athletic teams that say they're in the zone means that they're resonating and the concept mentally and physically to what they're getting ready to do. It turns out that this causes us to alter our notion of how our perception takes place. We call it our intuition, and we call our intuition a sixth sense. Dr. Mitchell thinks that we should call our intuition our first sense, because it's rooted in quantum phenomena that came along well before there was any life on this planet and well before the planet became organized itself. We are looking at one of the most fundamental perceptual mechanisms in nature. It hasn't been able to be authentically described because classic physics didn't allow us to describe these things. Psychic stuff between classical physics doesn't work, but with quantum mechanics and the discovery of the quantum hologram, we can, but that's only been understood within the last 12 to 15 years. And we understand this by resonance, non-locality, and entanglement. These concepts have only been validated in the last 20 years. We know physical things come from the zero-point field, but consciousness is still a great enigma. It is not clear, for example, we know we're conscious, but we now know that consciousness comes throughout nature, is defined as being aware, but in regard to Homo sapiens, it's defined as being aware of our awareness, our self-reflectedness. Those are the two types of consciousness, but they are related. If we go back to quantum entanglement, where particles can go across the universe and react, they seem to know what happens to each other, and that is the most simple, fundamental act of perception in all of nature, where two particles interact with each other and knowing what's happening to the other one instantaneously. The active side of perception is where human beings, self-aware, conscious, being influenced the world with its thought. That's the passage side of incoming information, but it has long been looked down on by modern science because it's the interaction between mind and matter in a proactive sense. But Dr. Mitchell argues that he's seen this happen firsthand, both in life and in a laboratory setting, and that we're capable of mind over matter phenomena. He also believes in psychokinesis, with one of the more important applications being healing. First ones he studied, he had personally, over the years, he had had prostate cancer and kidney cancer. He had sought alternative doctors and healers, psychic healers, and before he passed away, he was clinically confirmed as cleared after seeing the psychic healers. He didn't believe because he has passed away, he didn't believe in grabbing a pill. He believed going to the earth to feel better. He knows it works, and the only question is how to model it in science. He believes he's narrowing it down on an answer, but he can state confidently that due to the quantum hologram and how nature interacts with that, the universe we live in is intelligent, self-organizing, creating, learning, trial and error, participatory, non-local, interconnected, and it's an evolutionary system. In conclusion, I'd like to leave you with a couple of sayings that I came across while working on this paper. If quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you haven't understood it yet. Everything we call real is made up of things that cannot be regarded as real. Niels Bohr said that. Albert Einstein, the true sign of intelligence is not knowledge but imagination. He also said, everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. In his 1935 paper regarding quantum mechanics, Einstein stated that according to special relativity, quantum mechanics must be wrong or at least incomplete. He said it's spooky action at a distance. Nikola Tesla advises, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Buckminster Fuller said, if you want to understand the human condition, you must first understand the universe. But the mystical saying is, if you want to understand the universe, you must first understand the self. I hope you enjoyed this information. Thanks for listening. Namaste.
Namaste.
Go Ravens.